Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Line update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to State of State, a Penn State football show presented by FanDuel. Play your game. I'm Tom Hannifan. He is Nittany Lion legend Deon Butler, sitting in for Justin King. Today, we're touching on the latest recruiting news for Penn State football. For those of you that are regular listeners and viewers of State, you know this is not necessarily something that we dive into all that often, but there's a couple of pieces here and there that are at least intriguing, and considering the transition from the James Franklin era to the current Matt Campbell era, there's some developments that I think could be really positive indicators for Penn State into the future. And we talked about the release of the 2026 schedule and just looking ahead, but trying not to jump to too many conclusions, which, I mean, that's very natural to do as Penn State fans. Deon, I will jump to a conclusion and say that, Deon, if Big Noon Kickoff takes Penn State versus USC next year, I am going to scream, because we have one really good home game that it looks like right now on the schedule. And that's no disrespect to Wisconsin and Rutgers and Purdue and Minnesota, but it looks like Penn State versus USC is the best home game Penn State fans are going to get in Happy Valley this year. So I'm begging anybody out there that works for Fox, just ignore it. Just ignore that game exists. Because also, Deon, and you know what it's like playing on the West Coast when you were at the Seattle Seahawks, that, you know, your body would have to get used to what is like a 9 a.m. kickoff if it's 12 p.m. Eastern. So you don't want to do that to the SC Trojans. I know there's a lot of Trojans within Fox. You don't want to do that to the SC Trojans. Come on, you want this to be a level playing field, right? I would just do the right thing, Deon. It can't be Big Noon Kickoff. Please give us Penn State versus USC at night in the whiteout at night, please.
Yeah, no, I mean, I hope both teams are rolling into there with undefeated records, or really good records for that matter, right? I mean, just to think about a season without a whiteout since we've started having them just kind of seems like, you know, that's not a real season, right? So hopefully that's something that the college football world wants to continue. Is like, I mean, that's kind of really a real tradition now in college football, not just at Penn State, but that whole whiteout is a whole situation that people pay attention to. So I'm with you. I'm hoping, like, hey, as of now, looking at it on paper, that looks like a primetime game early in the year where it's kind of like two teams that'll kind of probably be one of the first bigger tests for either team. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm hoping the same thing you are, man. Like, it just can't be a season without a whiteout.
Yeah, and even like we've obviously had the whiteout, but doing the whiteout at noon defeats the purpose optically, and then doing it at night against Penn State's second or third best home opponent, then you're just kind of doing it to go through the motions. And we've been through that. And this past year was the first time since 2019 that Penn State had a nighttime whiteout legitimately against its best home opponent. It didn't work out the way we all hoped against Oregon, but still, it was incredible to get it back. So thank you to NBC. I hope that somebody at NBC, a lot of people at NBC are listening, and we'll able to, make that happen. So enough about the schedule. Let's talk a little bit about the recruiting news. This snowstorm has been crushing the United States. I'm getting it here in Nashville. You're getting a little bit of it in Atlanta. Some people, obviously, in the Northeast are having it far worse than we are. So we send our best to everybody that's dealing with this, because it's no small thing. Part of this snowstorm is that it did affect Penn State's junior days this past weekend, in that Kemon Spell was supposed to go to Penn State. Obviously, due to the weather, unfortunately, he was unable to make the trip. He is now set to go to Georgia this coming weekend. So some people are panicking. Okay, maybe he ducked the visit or the weather, like, oh no, we're going to lose him to Georgia, that sort of thing. And then there's also the discussion online, which might be a pipe dream. I have no idea if there's any truth to it, of him potentially attempting to reclassify for the class of 2026. As it stands right now, he's a class of 2027 five-star running back, the number one running back in the class, number 3 overall recruit, depending on where you look. So any concern from you about Spell? Because like I've said before, like, this feels like it's a long-term process. It's been a long-term process, and unfortunately some things cropped up. You hope he doesn't go to Georgia, but you lost him before. You could lose him again. How much do you get hung up on this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously right. Just as a coaching staff, you would love to be able to talk to him first, get him on campus as soon as possible, right? But in the long run, I don't think this is that big of a deal. There's still plenty of time, one, to get him back to campus. I'm pretty sure at some point, my guess would be he's been to campus if he's a Pennsylvania guy, McKeesport.
Yes.
So he's seen campus. So it's more about the coaching staff and actually what they are, showing him and telling him what they're going to become, right? Like he's seen the facility. I'm sure he's seen the stadium. Like that is already done. Now it's really just a coaching staff. So to that point, I think it's really just about those guys being able to talk to him. And there's still plenty of time for him to circle back, get to campus. But even while not on campus, he can still build relationships with these coaches and they can kind of talk about, once again, like we talked, the culture of the team, what this team is going to look like, what the plan for him looks like. So I think, in the long run, it's not that big of a deal, obviously, right? If he's out here and I'm in Atlanta, he's out at Georgia up the road. But it's like, once again, he's 27. Like,
right.
Guys can commit, decommit, not sign. So even if he verbally commits, right? Like you don't love it, but it's like that's far from over. So I just don't think, it's just something to panic about.
And I also don't want to be super negative, but like how many times have we seen players that were big time recruits and they show up somewhere for one season and then they leave? You and I were just talking about AJ Harris before we hopped on here. He was a 5-star coming out of high school, went to Georgia for 1 year, transfers to Penn State, 2 seasons at Penn State, transfers out. So, I mean, like, that's just kind of the world we're living in. You have no idea what could happen. You hope a kid stays healthy, all that sort of stuff. But there have been the comparisons with Kemon Spell to Saquon Barkley. He's a different stature, but his highlight tape is just absolutely sensational. I think the interesting thing as Penn State's recruiting approach is changing with the times is that you feel pretty good about Penn State's history to recruit running back talent. And I was thinking about this before we came on here, Deon, is that, yes, Jawan Sider was the running back coach here for a long time. And now it's Savon Huggins, who put out an interesting tweet earlier on this week with the lion head emoji and hashtag we are. So some people speculating, is that kind of the new take on James Franklin's we are better post? Like, what does he know that we don't know? So like everybody's kind of waiting and seeing when it comes to Spell. But the one thing I was thinking about is that, it hasn't mattered for decades, really, who the running back coach is. Not to say it hasn't mattered, but Penn State's production at the running back position has been consistent since what, the 1960s? So if you're going to hit at a position, running back feels like a pretty safe bet. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, there have been very, very many just good running backs, right? And whether they're just freaks of nature, or I can think about guys that I play with, right? Like Evan Royster, who's quietly atop the record books, but it's just like just really, really good running backs over time. Obviously with Tony Hunt early. So it's just like, there's definitely plenty of guys that have come through that program and, running back talent in Pennsylvania, and just being able outside of Pennsylvania too, for them to get guys that can run the football and, more importantly, right, have the offensive line in front of them, I think, to sell to those guys that, hey, you'll be able to run the football here. And this is what we're committed to doing. And we have a long track record of being able to put guys in that, hey, they're going to get yards, they're going to be productive at the college level, and, that'll give you a great shot at the next level.
Two positions that you've seen Penn State be aggressive on the trail recently when it comes to recruits. Running back, obviously, Kemon Spell. Everybody's paying attention to Spell. But then defensive back. And again, that's another position that Penn State has been pretty consistent at for a long time. And I was thinking about this, is that, we're biased. Obviously, Justin King is a big part of this show, and his stepfather is Terry Smith. So we think very highly of Terry Smith. But also so does the rest of the country. And a lot of people believe that Terry Smith is the best defensive back coach in America. And that's not just Penn State people. That's people outside the program. Jim Knowles spoke glowingly of Terry Smith when he was first hired by Penn State. And Terry Smith has been making the rounds to select 5-star defensive backs, 4 stars, depending on where you look. But Gabe Jenkins and Josh Dobson are 2 guys that he's got to meet with. Gabe Jenkins is out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So another guy that, like, hey, just like Spell, you'd love to keep him in state. And then Joshua Dobson out of Huff High School in Cornelius, North Carolina. So again, this is still looking ahead to the class of 2027. But you would understand this far better than I from your time playing for Penn State, is that if you're able to hit at positions that you've been successful in developing in the past with 5 stars, do you find or have you seen in the past that, you know what, that can branch out and that can lead to other 5 and 4 stars being like, hey, you know, just because there's a corner there and I'm not a corner, I'm not a halfback, but, you know, maybe I'm a quarterback, or maybe I'm a wide receiver, or maybe I'm a defensive tackle all of a sudden that's a little bit more interested in Penn State. Did you experience that, or have you seen that in the evolution of college football?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a couple ways to look at that, but one is definitely right. Stars matter to other young kids, right? As far as those are also the guys they're hanging around, because obviously they're getting rated by going to these different camps. So a lot of the times these guys become friends, they stay in contact. So not only is it like, hey, he's also a 4 or 5 star or whatever it is, but like, hey, that's the guy that I hung out with at this camp. And if he's going there, if I'm a defensive guy, even if I'm not a cornerback, like you're saying, well, you know what, now if we got a guy that can cover and QB's gonna have to pat the ball twice and I'm a DN, like, hey, that works out for me. I can get an extra second to get there, and vice versa. If I'm a corner and we've got a 5-star DN, like, hey, we got a guy that's going to be able to get there without us having to blitz, right? So it all works in that way, where it's just like, once again, those guys are usually friends or in contact somehow. And then you also you want to play with other great talent. So when you see those guys, you're like, hey, they're getting talent. I want to play alongside that talent. And it's just going to be like, just a frenzy out there as far as talent wise. And then the other part, as far as did I see it, right? I just had a little bit of that, right, with kind of that big part and with Coach Paterno with, right, bringing in Derek and Justin, right? That was just almost, it seemed like program, shift as far as like, hey, these guys came in when it was going not really great. And then, obviously had some other talent around them, but they produced that first year. And once they produced, that turned around, and that next class that we had was just loaded with the amount of talent and like, hey, those guys went there, they produced immediately. That's what I want to do. And then get in this atmosphere, this stadium and things like that. And then circling back to Coach Terry, right? He's got 2 young, which looks like good corners now, right? So it's just like, there's another evidence of, hey, if you can ball, man, you're going to get out there and you're going to look good. Like, hey, I want to be that. And usually if you're that good, you don't really think too much about the competition. You just think, hey, well, I'm going to get in there too, and we all going to get on the field and ball out, especially at corner when you can play a lot of nickel in different situations like that.
And you bring up an interesting point, and you and I have talked about this recently and had Brad Culp on here to talk about some of the issues of the 2025 campaign and what went wrong under James Franklin, and kind of this regression of, well, we're going to lean on the guys that have been loyal to the program, veterans, and you can understand that. But at the same time, like, there were some talented true freshmen that did eventually see the field. Like, it took a little while for Darius Dixon to get on the field this past season. Everybody has been shouting from the rooftops to see more Kobe Howard and Tyseer Denmark, and those situations have developed in their own respective ways. But it feels like for a while under James Franklin, you kind of got away from true freshmen really getting on the field and making an impact. So it's one thing for Joe Paterno to say yes to that, because as you know better than I, for so many years, you're either a junior or senior, or you weren't playing basically. And then it seems like somehow Franklin got back to that. And it's like, whatever happened to best player plays? And I think that change maybe could happen under Matt Campbell. We have no idea if that's absolutely going to happen, at least in 2026. I don't know personally. I'm not necessarily looking for that. I don't know what you're looking for in that department, because 2026, it's like, hey, you got a lot of transfers in, just stabilize this thing. I think that's all Penn State fans are hoping for.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I definitely think it's a stabilization, and I think it will be some of the older guys, right? Especially the Iowa State guys that are coming over that'll help set the tone, because they know how this coaching staff operates, right? But obviously, you're still going to have plenty of talented guys from our roster that are still here that'll be learning, and the coaching staff will be learning how to use them as well. But that's also another, program thing, as far as guys aren't blind. They see who kind of should be playing, or if a guy's making plays but just still can't get on the field, you're wondering, well, if they can't do it, well, how am I going to do it if, So, I mean, people pay attention to that, and that definitely, eats into your psyche as a player and the team, and it permeates throughout the team. If it's not a feeling of like, hey man, whoever is like really balling, like could care less about how many stars, who they came in with, what. It's just about if they're better, then let's play. I can think about, not to talk bad about it, but we had, when I was there, Austin Scott was one of the most highly recruited running backs that I could probably think of, that I just used to hear Austin Scott, Austin Scott, Austin Scott. And, ended up playing, but then Tony Hunt took over the starting job, and it didn't matter, right? It was, and obviously Tony had a really good career, but it was like, it didn't matter how many stars you had or what. If you were playing and making plays and doing the right thing, that was who was going to play on our teams. And so hopefully that'll be, what happens here. And it's not about, how you came in or whatnot. It's just about what you do to produce on the field.
State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Also, official State of State merchandise is available now. Support the show and grab State of State t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today.
According to 24/7 Sports, Joshua Dobson right now, there's a laundry list of schools that are after him, but in terms of what now I guess you would allude to be the top 5 would be schools like Alabama, Arkansas, Auburn, Boston College, and Clemson. So heavy SEC presence, some ACC in there, but predominantly the Southeast, obviously being a kid from North Carolina. Meanwhile, according to 24/7 Sports, Gabe Jenkins is described as warm and has a June 5th visit scheduled to Penn State. So that's a long ways off. Other schools that are in the mix for Jenkins would be Baylor, Florida, Florida State, and the reigning national champions, Indiana. So those are all developing situations. Speaking of a developing situation, and I suppose it's a good thing that we don't have Justin on here because it would be a conflict of interest, because he's done some work with Mr. Amazing, Khalil Taylor, also from the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, from Gibsonia, Pennsylvania, currently playing for Pine Richland. Khalil Taylor is listed as a 4-star wide receiver, according to 24/7 Sports. He is warm, according to 24/7 Sports. This has been fluctuating for a number of months. Obviously, James Franklin being fired, it changed a lot of things. And also there was the issue, Penn State's struggled developing wide receivers for many years now. Noah Pauley is the new wide receivers coach in from Iowa State. It's been talked about heavily. He had 2 wide receivers from his 2024 team with the Cyclones that went on to be NFL draft picks and have been productive in the National Football League. So that's kind of the flag that this staff is waving. Whether or not that's going to sway Khalil Taylor to go to Penn State, stay in state, that remains to be seen. You've seen it before, Deon. Wide receiver talent tends to gravitate towards Columbus, Ohio. So that can happen. But Khalil Taylor, at least being interested again in the Penn State program, it's encouraging. If it actually comes to fruition, he could be a flag bearer of change. I don't know if it's actually going to materialize. And at the very minimum, it could just be an indicator. Again, he's listed as a 4-star. You and I have talked about it before. To us, you and I, the stars do not matter. To players, to fans, the stars matter. I think Indiana proved that the stars really don't matter. It's about the development. So I guess is it too soon really for wide receiver talent to be looking at Campbell, Mauser, and Pauley and saying, this is what's going to get me to where I want to go as a player? Is this the right development route?
So I think it'll come down to the message that they're sending and, the storyline that they're telling and the, whatever it is that it's going to look like for a wide receiver. Because to your point, right, it's been very clear wide receiver has struggled, right? If I'm a wide receiver, I'm not really looking at Penn State because guys come and go and just don't seem to really have on-field production in college. So it's kind of one of those things where if you do want to be the flag bearer, you have to really believe in his vision for you and what it's going to be. And then you can have that, right? Because there are guys, obviously, and Justin could speak to that as well, and Derek, as far as like, hey, it doesn't look great here, but I believe in myself and I can help change this thing around. And so you can have a guy that has that mentality, or, you might be a year away where it's like, once again, people love results. So, okay, you can tell me the vision, but show me this year that all of a sudden it looks like there's actually a efficient passing game down the field. Wide receivers are actually putting up numbers. I'm looking at the stat sheet and I'm seeing 4 and 5 wide receivers having catches and not just tight ends or 2 wideouts and that's it. And then they'll say, okay, now I believe you. And then that'll get to where you start to up the talent level. I think as far as getting those guys that'll say, all right, well, now I believe in them. And they've done this with, whatever talent's there on that roster. And hopefully, obviously, there's still some talent there. But it'll be an influx, I think, if you have more guys that feel like, hey, Penn State is actually a place that can develop wide receivers now and kind of get that stigma off of them. I think it'll be a great thing. And it'll be kind of like a year 2, you show me, and then here we come.
And to that point, I feel like it's going to take a year or two, whether it's Taylor or not. And it'd be great to keep Taylor in state and get him to Penn State. But it's going to be a year or two because also the quarterback situation is going to be a year or two. You're going to have Rocco Becht for one season. And then is it the Alex Mansky show, the other transfer from Iowa State at quarterback, who was a 4-star coming out of high school? Peyton Falzone was somebody who is a part of this class of 2026 that has a lot of buzz and was committed to Penn State, then to Auburn and back to Penn State. Casey Evans also in this class. There's a lot of questions at the future with quarterback. And I'm just personally curious to see what Mauser's offense looks like. There's been some comparisons with what Mauser does to Kotelnicki in terms of the gimmicks and gadgets. So are they, I guess this upcoming season, will you be thinking it's like, hey, with the wide receiver position, it's maybe getting more with less, or kind of like the jury's still out because you have Eskilton, Sowell, and potentially Kobe Howard as your top 3 wide receivers? Does that feel like more with less, or just kind of like, hey, we got to see how this goes?
I mean, I honestly say I'll see how it goes, because it's one of those things like, you could have asked me before and I just didn't know where the problem was at, right? But then we kind of started seeing guys leave. Lambert goes out, puts up a good season. Wallace goes and has one. So you're okay. So maybe it's not just the talent in the room, where I would have said like, hey, our guys not getting open. Right. And so all of that to say, I feel like the jury's out on like, okay, here's a reset slate. Now let's see what this offense looks like. Let's see if it looks like we're putting guys in position to succeed. Are we actually throwing the ball down the field and then we see, it just doesn't look like separation at all, or, throws aren't even being made, or things like that. I think we'll just start to really be able to see that within kind of the first couple of weeks. And I think this coaching staff honestly knows that as well. It's like, hey, passing game has been an issue around here. That's going to be one of the things that, not only are they going to need to answer themselves, but actually to start to fix that wide receiver room, you're going to have to start getting guys to buy in and believe that, hey, I'm going to be able to make a real impact on game day.
For the record, we've talked about this before, and I don't mean this in a negative way. You had how many stars coming out of high school?
Man, I don't even know if you could find a page for me. That I might have had the little gray outline silhouette. It was like a silhouette.
We've looked, that little innocuous kind of like X, like they don't even have a picture. No, I think we've talked about it before. It's like either 0 stars or 1 star, and you walked on. And you set records at Penn State.
I mean, once again, it's a mindset, and there's different ways that everybody gets there, and that's why I'll be reluctant to say more with less, because I don't know. There could be a guy that doesn't have a star, and it's like, actually, this guy's a dog. Yeah, right. Fair. I mean, I could, you mentioned it. I think Indiana's the poster story this year of just like a bunch of guys that weren't highly recruited, and obviously they're going against obviously all the teams they played in the playoffs were all these, top whatever type of kids, and they were doing what they do. And then even looking at the game, and it's like the wideout that didn't even play at the beginning of the year, that's now their big play guy, number 80, who had us coming out party at Penn State.
Decker. I always get it wrong.
I think it's Beck, I think. But this is like, right, he had his coming out party against Penn State, and then all of a sudden now he's like back shoulder king. But it's like, these are the type of guys you don't know if they're sitting there on your roster, and it's like, okay, they can develop into something. So that's why I'm interested to see, what the guys, when they get an opportunity in this new offense, what it looks like, because I just really feel like it is untapped potential there, and we got to really like let them go out there and play it and see what becomes of it.
Charlie Becker, I looked it up. I'm just glad, one, Penn State doesn't play Indiana this upcoming season. That's good for fans. And also Omar Cooper Jr. is going to the NFL draft. So you just eliminate any of the nightmares from last season. If I see the replay one more time, if I hear...
don't watch the NFL draft him, because his profile page is going to be littered with that.
It looked like he levitated. It was fascinating. And then like I watched it live in the stadium, as you well know. And then I hear the call from Gus Johnson where it just was like a horrible call. And like, this is sort of like knife right in the heart. The whole experience was terrible. I'll end on this. Obviously, a lot of recruiting, just like updates here and there. And we're going to continue to keep an eye on these things. Obviously, we're getting into the off season and people are starting to be real sad that football's going away. Obviously, February 8th is Seahawks versus Patriots in the Super Bowl. According to FanDuel, the Seahawks are favored by 4.5. So play your game accordingly. But I think one interesting thing is I'm looking forward to seeing how Matt Campbell and his staff bridge the gap that was widened, unfortunately, by James Franklin. And what I mean by that is the gap between the past of Penn State football and the present. There had been some work to repair that, but it still left a lot to be desired. And you can understand James Franklin coming off the Sandusky scandal and the sanctions, trying to create kind of a new image for Penn State, and then slowly over time working on that. But there was certainly a divide. There was certainly a divide between James Franklin's Penn State and then the entire holistic look at Penn State football. So I think if that is part of the pitch, then you're going to be able to look beyond, well, James Franklin's tenure, you didn't see wide receivers. If you look just a little bit further, you can see that there were some great wide receivers like yourself, like Jordan Norwood, like Derek Williams, all the way back to O.J. McDuffie. Like there's a tremendous history. And I think hopefully Matt Campbell and Terry Smith will embrace that history. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that subject, but that just came to mind.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would love to see that. I mean, I think obviously Franklin had his own way about doing things, and, you know, not to bash him, was a great guy when you see him and talk to him and things like that. And obviously he has to move how he moves, and he was successful with getting the program to a really high level. So, you know, but obviously you also look and you see those kind of some of those other schools, and, you know, Miami is an example just probably because Irvin's so hyperactive on the side, but you just see,
that's one way to put it. Yeah.
You just see a plethora of their guys on the sideline, and you just think about all the great history that Penn State has, and it'll be awesome to be able to see that, right? You talk about, you know, the wide receivers kind of recently, it seems like a struggle, but you talk about, you know, your Allen Robinsons and like those years where you've got these guys, and it's like, it would be amazing to be able to go back and kind of see those guys on the side. And obviously the game's changing a little bit today with NIL, and, you know, guys have 3 schools under their belt before they get somewhere, but still just to be able to have that as part of, you know, this program moving forward is like, hey, there's a rich history here. It's more than just NIL and money. That's today's game. I get it. But like, this is the brotherhood that comes with it. These are the guys that have been here. This is the support that you're going to get. And, you know, that would be great to really see that. And like I said, just for me being part of it, I would love to be able to go back and be able to see that on the sideline and run into, you know, a lot of the older guys and kind of have that feel where it's like a really welcoming feeling to just be back and really support, honestly, Coach Campbell and this new staff moving forward, because they're going to need it as well. And I think a lot of the guys, I think the sentiment is that obviously we love Penn State the way we love Penn State. So whoever that head coach is, and it's Coach Campbell, we're going to support you. So like, let's figure it out. You got our support. Let's do it.
KJ Hamler, Jahan Dotson.
Yeah.
Shout out Joe Jaravicious. I can't believe I didn't mention Joe Jaravicious, but man, was he fantastic once upon a time.
I saw Parker had a great year near the end of year. Washington.
Oh yeah, Parker Washington, obviously with the Jaguars. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, there, to your point, there's guys there, and it's just kind of like I said, like, you know, I've never met a handful of those guys personally, but it's like, maybe if we kind of can get them, and it'll be great to meet some of those guys, right? Because
Juwan Johnson's still in the league.
He is. Because they converted him to tight end, right?
I think that, yeah. I mean, like he was a big guy.
tight end.
So, I mean, like he converted to tight end. I think even Joe Jaravicius was a guy that was like kind of a quasi tight end once he got into the National Football League. And then I'm always a sucker for Ethan Kilmer, man. Number 41, you know.
Good old Ethan, man. Orange Bowl catch, man. Orange Bowl catch.
Thank you all so much for joining us here on State of State, a Penn State football show. Hop in the comments section. We normally don't talk about recruiting news, but wanted to give you kind of our viewpoint on a handful of things. So hopefully Matt Campbell, Terry Smith are able to capitalize on a lot of this movement, and it is very much a developing situation for the class of 2027. Feels like things have calmed down after a pretty wild December and most of January when it comes to the transfer portal and the class of 2026. So winter workouts, all that good stuff being in the future. So we're going to keep an eye on that as best we can. So he's Deon Butler. I'm Tom Hannifan. Thank you for joining in. This episode has been presented by FanDuel.
Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. For just 99 cents a month, you can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. State of State is presented by FanDuel.